Good morning, great to see you. Bonada on this St David's Day. A bit of a Celtic, collectivism here going on here. I'm Nicky Campbell, welcome to the Big Questions. Now, just as statistics show that teenage pregnancies are up, the government is issuing a leaflet advising parents on how to talk to their children about sex. Let me quote from it for you. Trying to convince them of what's right and wrong may discourage them from being open. Well, our first big question, should parents tell their children that sex can be wrong? With us is a former teenage mum who didn't listen to her parents' moral advice. And as a new reality TV series offers 80s pop stars cosmetic surgery in an attempt to rekindle their careers, we ask, do we place too much value on appearance? The woman who spent over £500,000 turning herself into a real-life Barbie doesn't think so. Yesterday, thousands of people paid £35 per head to attend events across the UK rallying against the rise of the so-called Big Brother state. Our last big question this morning, a little bit later, should we have a right to privacy? Well, this woman was even secretly filmed putting out her rubbish. More from her later. Here on St David's Day, we're in Cardiff at Mickleston Community College, and being caught on camera this morning, we have agony aunt and broadcaster Jenny Trent-Hughes, the Reverend Lorraine Kavanagh, chaplain to Cardiff University, Hindu teacher Akandadi Das, and the Falklands War veteran, now charity campaigner Simon Weston. Well, with Britain topping the European League of Teen Pregnancies, it's clear that sex education isn't working. Should parents actually tell their children that sex can be wrong? What do you think? Jane Miles, Sexpression is your organisation, a sex education programme. Isn't that the problem? Teenage pregnancies, top of the league in Europe, because not enough parents are saying this is wrong.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think that parents should be saying what's right and what's wrong. I think their job is to inform their children, about safe sex, ensure that their children know where to get contraception, how to practice sex safely, and teach from a very impartial viewpoint.
So what if a 14-year-old son or daughter came? What about casual sex? Should I have a one-night stand? What would you say to them? Surely no.
I don't think that they would need to say, no, this is right and this is wrong. A 14-year-old has the intellect to decide what's morally right and what's wrong.
Joy?
Yeah, I think I disagree with you, Jane, because I think the parents' role is essential in this whole area, that that we have a role to be teaching and bringing up our kids. And surely, as a parent, I want to teach my kids what's good and what's right.
Don't they want to do just the opposite of what you tell them, though?
It depends on your relationship, doesn't it, and the kind of relationship you're building. But I think that I want to have the opportunity to show my kids not just the facts about, the whole sex thing. Research has actually shown that kids don't just want facts from their parents. They want more than that. They want to know about opinions and the emotional side and feeling side of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's parents abdicating moral responsibility, Jane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that parents should be there to guide their children. I think they can give them guidance, but I don't think they should put their own specific moral views out there. I think they should use government guidelines, and I think that they should say what's legal. And
but it's illegal to have sex under the age of 16, so why can't you then say this is wrong? Don't do it. Why can't you say that?
Yeah.
I just think that the most important thing is that these young people know how to do it, like how to have sex safely, and that it's not wrong to go out and have casual sex, but if you're going to do it, you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself against it.
OK, Sarah?
Children won't listen anyway at the end of the day. They don't always listen to their parents. You can only guide them in the right direction. I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and she's obviously she's very clued up about sex, as it happens, because I speak quite openly about it, and I think that's what parents should actually do, speak openly to their children about sex, and they're going to do it anyway, so all this fanning around with...
For want of a better phrase. And apologies for anyone of a sensitive nature or otherwise first thing on a Sunday morning. But we hear what you're saying. Wendy, you want to come in here as well. Yeah. But is this not putting up the white flag? Views from the audience soon as well. They're going to do it anyway.
I mean, my mum brought us up. She was very honest and upfront with both myself and my sister. And I think it goes an awful long way. You know, it does help you, it does prepare you, it gives you an insight to life. And, you know, it's developed me as a person. So, yeah, I think being upfront and honest with your children is very, very important.
But upfront and honest is one thing. I mean, it's almost, you know, to say, would you not say to your 13-year-old, your 14-year-old, your 12-year-old that when you come to have sex, avoid one-night stands, avoid the possible harm, psychological it could cause you, and also STIs? Would you not give them...
Yes, of course. And,
so that's saying it's wrong, isn't it?
And practice safe sex. And obviously you shouldn't be having sex at underage. But at the end of the day, children out there, the majority of them are doing it. And that is it. They're having sex at 13 or 14 nowadays.
That is absolutely untrue. In fact, the vast majority of children of that age are not having sex. And even more so, there is a wealth of research that shows that if parents do communicate their moral values, and I teach my children, for example, that adultery is wrong, that sex with corpses, sex with shoes, group sex is wrong.
Oh, for goodness sake. Let's keep things in proportion.
But there are people out there who will be following the line that we heard over there. That if you say...
anything goes.
That's right, and that's what that government leaflet is saying. And I think that if that's the tack that the government is taking, we shall go further down the road of disaster we have at the moment.
What would you like to say, Isaiah?
I agree completely. I feel it's very much indicative of the society at the moment, which possibly all of our questions this morning are at the root of. The society at the moment is not led by a moral basis.
Absolutely.
There's no moral
Without a moral compass, you're bound to get lost. Even with one, you may get lost, but without it, you're
See,
totally
Jane, you
sunk.
seem to be encouraging, as well as you're putting forward your arguments, you seem to be encouraging life without a moral compass for teenagers.
I'm not saying that at all. I just don't think it's the parents' responsibility to push their moral views onto their children. I think it's up to the children.
Jenny Trent Hughes.
I think I want to cry. If it is not the parents' responsibility, then who on earth is it? When you have children, that is the first thing that you realize. And especially in a society where everyone isn't going to church anymore, we're not living in villages anymore, it is even more your responsibility more than ever. And what we're seeing here from some of the people is, do you know that in the 70s, across Europe and England, all the levels were the same for things like STDs, teenage pregnancies, everything. Now when you look at it, all the other countries have pretty much solved the problem, and we're escalating. So that means that we are doing something terribly wrong.
But is that as a result of parents not taking... Is it, Jane?
Well, I think it's about sexual health education. I don't think they're getting the information early enough.
What about sexual mental health?
Well, Leanne, I see you wanted to come in here. When Jane said this is the problem, it's about sexual education, and you were nodding because you were 17 when you had Nathaniel, right?
I was 18 when I had Nathaniel. I was 17 when I got pregnant.
All right, okay.
For Nathaniel. I do think that it is partly to do with the parents and morally, where you say don't have sex until you're after 16, so that it's not illegal. Sex under 16, but also what if the children can't feel that they can go to their parents? What if they can't go to their parents and say, Mum, I'm ready to have sex, I want to have sex, because they feel that it was bad? Who do they go to then?
Because, well, first of all, I think that as a parent, it's a discussion that you need to start having with your child at a young age. And it's not about telling them that it is wrong or right. It is about saying, if you make the choice, here are the possible things that might happen.
You might harm
it
yourself,
might feel
you might
good,
hurt somebody else.
you
Yeah.
might feel good, it might be fun. However, if it goes wrong, this and this and this will happen.
But Leanne, you have an excellent point. Not everybody, and I'm sure Joy, you might want to come in here as well. You have two, a boy and a girl, is it? But 11 and 13. I'm sure you have a fantastic relationship with your children, but maybe that's not always the case, Leanne.
No,
you can't talk.
May I come in about
Well, let's hear from Leanne. Just what was your situation? Did you talk? Did your parents say this is wrong?
I spoke to my mum and dad. So I spoke to my mum mainly about sex education. She told me the moral of it, that to wait until I'd find the right person, till after I was 16, till I thought I was ready. And then when I was ready to come back to her, and she'll give me help and advice, protection, safety, and everything that I need to do. But if you're a teenager and you've got a boyfriend or if you've got a girlfriend and you want to have sex, you're going to have sex regardless of who you speak to, of whether your mum and dad are going to tell you what's morally wrong or morally right.
So you just go off and do the opposite sometimes, go and tidy your room. What do you do?
Yeah, basically, if most teenagers will rebel, and if you tell them not to go and do something, they're going to do so. If you tell them that the bridge is dangerous, half the time you'll find your kids climbing on the bridge because you've told them not to.
And you said something when we were having a cup of tea earlier on. You said your mum got the trick of getting you to tidy your room by saying to you, don't tidy your room.
Don't go and do this, because she knew I'd do the exact opposite.
Tom, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, I think that's completely untrue that if you're told that something is wrong, that you'll want to do it. It very much depends, as we've said already, on the relationship you have with your parents. And if you can see that they do have your best interests at heart, then you're going to be much more likely to comply with their moral values as well.
Did they deliver a very clear moral message to you, your
Yeah,
parents?
Absolutely. I was brought up with a Christian worldview that God designed sex as a good gift to be enjoyed within marriage, and anything outside of that is against his plans for us and is bad for us as individuals and as a society. And because I could see that it was for my best interests, and because I could see my parents loved me and wanted me to grow up with those values, I was much more likely to be
But what about
in tune
temptation,
with
getting
it.
out there when you went to college, for example, and just, you know, doing what a lot of young men do?
Well, like I've said to you already, it depends on the relationship. And because I could see that these values were good values, and because I could see from statistics and just around the country how these things are bad, it is the right thing to abstain. And the suggestion...
Phrase, isn't it? The right thing to do. I'll come to you, Reverend Lorraine, in 1 second. 2 more comments from the back row there. First of all, you.
In my opinion, I think if your parents are honest with you, then you're going to be honest with your parents, and then you'll have that trust and know they're always going to tell you the truth, and then you have the freedom to make up your own mind if they're supporting you and telling you what's right, what's wrong. But then if they give you the freedom to make up your own mind, then you're more likely to do it in the right way.
Reverend Lorraine, is that what it's about? Is it about telling children, no, this is wrong, or is it about putting the whole thing into a proper context?
I think it's certainly not about dishing out rules and regulations, and the whole...
Why not?
Because the issue of bringing up children, or the relationship between children and parents, is not about a battlefield. It ought to be about a common relationship together, and how we relate to our teenage children, whether we relate well to them or not, begins way back, probably when they're 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. If you're not actually a family who regularly, for example, sits around the table and has a meal together and talks about other things which are of interest to the children and of interest to parents and of interest ultimately as they get older to how they're going to function in society and in the world. This whole question of sex suddenly appears, and no, you have got nothing to say to them.
So dealing with situations as they are then, there are a lot of households, a lot of families in this country where for a parent or parents to say this is wrong, Simon, is just the worst possible thing they can say.
Yeah, I think it's about, as most people have agreed, it's about discussing with your children and giving them boundaries. The fact that children need to know where they can and can't go. I mean, I wholly disagree with you saying that parents shouldn't get involved in all this. Clearly advising them about contraception is not good enough, because STDs are on the rise, single young youth pregnancies on the rise. So, and most people know about contraception, so that's not working. The fact that we need to be more inclusive as families and people doing the right thing.
Well, Jane wants to take issue with you're just shaking.
I'm not saying that parents shouldn't be open. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think it's very important that parents are open and that they discuss with their children about sex. I'm just saying that they shouldn't say this is wrong and this is right.
Well, we have to give them boundaries. We have to say it's right and wrong to do certain things at certain times. I mean, if you're 14 years of age, going out and having sex is not advisable. The repercussions on that are absolutely disastrous.
Sarah, what would you say to your 14-year-old? If you had a 14-year-old and your 14-year-old said, I want to go have sex with my boyfriend, what advice would you give her?
I'd advise her on safe sex, because she'll still go and do it anyway, probably. I mean, at the end of the day, I've got an older girl who's 25 as well, and neither of them have got pregnant, neither of them have had any diseases, so obviously I'm doing something right somewhere along the line. But you
so that's an achievement as a mother, if your children are having sex and they haven't picked up an STI. Is that
No, that's not what I'm saying. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is you advise them accordingly. At the end of the day, they will still go and make their own judgment on whether they want to have sex or not, regardless of the age.
But there's a bigger picture in all of this. It's not just about having safe sex and avoiding getting STIs. It's about what kind of impact does sleeping around, whether you're 14 or 25, have on you and your emotional development and just your inner being. You know, is that a good thing to be doing?
How it can hurt you.
Yeah.
How you might hurt other people.
Yeah. So it's not just keep safe.
I think we're creating a huge confusion here between whether sex is wrong or whether sex is bad. And I think this is, with the greatest respect, I think Jade is creating this confusion
Jane.
to some extent. No, the lady with the black dress.
Jane. Yeah.
Jane, I beg your pardon. And I think this is something which is taken for granted, and many of these discussions don't make the difference between... Nobody, I think, here is trying to say that sex is inherently a bad thing, but that it is, in fact, a very good thing, and as the gentleman over there said, indeed a gift, and a gift for our happiness and our well-being. But gifts have to be used with care, especially very important gifts.
Kennedy, but what about the problem about this, the difference between telling and preaching and teaching, isn't it?
I think this is the key, and actually I took it as good news because I can't be alone in this, that I probably did avoid the big discussion with my children, and they're now older teenagers. But I did spend a lot of time chatting to them, watching television, particularly reality shows, and we really did discuss all the issues regarding sex, relationships, and all the things, and I found it extremely helpful. And I've never, ever told my kids not to do something. Although they know I have a moral, particular attitude and values.
Watching reality shows, like kind of watching natural history programmes to teach people about animals. Watching
things like Big Brother, you know.
Look, don't do that. That's fascinating.
No. We found it was a great way of actually raising the points and discussing. I've never told my kids not to do anything for 3 reasons. One is I wanted them to be open with me, and sometimes they're more open than I can handle, but it's good. Secondly, I wanted them to understand the gradations of morality, that it's not black and white.
Yes.
Sex is about context. It's about situations, you know, and I want them to really understand the differences in that. And thirdly, I don't want them to not do something simply because I tell them. I want them to understand the issues and the philosophy and the ideas behind it and make up their own mind, because that's what's going to stand them in good stead in life.
Dr. Stammers, then keep their hands up. Keep their hands up, because I'll come to you in a second.
I think it's very important to expose and blow open this myth of safe sex, because I presume that what you were talking about by communicating with your children about safe sex is sex with a condom. As a GP in 25 years, nearly all of the unplanned pregnancies that I've seen, all of the STIs I've seen in teenagers, have been in kids using contraception, mainly condoms. And they have a failure rate, and the failure rate in young teenagers particularly is very high.
But they're going to do it anyway. This is the point.
But that isn't true. But even if they are going to do it, to encourage them to think that if they're using a condom, they will be safe, that is a myth. The only safe sex is sex with a partner that you know you can trust when they say to you, I will give myself to you for the rest of my life.
And, well, 60 and 61, do you want to come back on that? 61% of young pregnancies end up in abortions as well, but there were some hands up over here. If you want to just hold fire for
hold fire for a minute.
Hold fire for a minute. Yeah, what would you like to say, Moustache? Yeah. Yes, you.
Yes, what I'd like to say is that before you preach to the children and teach them the moral guidelines, you have to lay down an example yourself. And I think the parents have to really...
Exactly right, exactly. And let me move that point, because, you know, if you have a highly sexualised household where some people just, you know, talk about sex all the time, of course there's going to be a certain value passed down. Yes, you said with a scarf.
Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous idea to try and say that just because you give kids some kind of moral guidelines that they're just going to adhere to them. There are so many other influences in society that draw people to having sex. The most important thing is that a kid feels that they can talk to their parents when something goes wrong. If you make it morally unacceptable, then there's no open forum for that child.
But you give your children, and let me keep it here, you give your children values on whether to steal, whether it's bad to steal, on how to treat their fellow human beings, values on money. Why not sex?
Because you have to rely on having a child who is turning 16. You have to give them some kind of independence. You have to tell them that they have the ability to make moral decisions for themselves, but ultimately the parent isn't there to try and communicate all these values to that child.
I'll come to you in a second. Leanne, you want to come back here? Yeah, go on.
And with the fact that you have a fantastic relationship with your mum and dad, but at the same time you've got friends as well who are having sex with their boyfriend or their girlfriend, and they're saying to you, peer pressure, and it's cool, it's the only thing to do, you go and do it, and then you speak about it with your friends.
And
What will you tell Nathaniel?
Most people do. I'm going to tell Nathaniel that when it comes down to him having a sexual relationship with his partner, to come to me or to come to me beforehand, and I will talk him through it. I will give him precautions, safety measures. When you're saying about condoms and that most of the infections and most of the unplanned pregnancies is because of people using condoms, how about actually teaching children from a younger age how to put a condom on, how to use condoms properly, so that there are less chances of them splitting?
I don't think you're going to like that idea, are you? I just get the impression.
Studies have shown that a third of students of graduate age in the States use condoms incorrectly. And when people say to me it's ridiculous to expect to teach children to abstain from sex, I say, is it more ridiculous to expect them to abstain or to use a condom at the age of 12 correctly and consistently every time? And the declining teenage sexual health in this country since condoms have been promoted in schools and all the rest of it has been nothing but
Professor,
downhill.
quick word. You come back
Speaks
on
for
that.
itself.
Professor.
Yes, I have to say that the figures for American figures suggest that the highest rates of teenage pregnancy are amongst groups who preach abstention. Abstention
That is absolutely untrue.
It is.
The
true.
Rosenbaum study that they've recently come out, the average age of kids in abstention circles in that study was 21. The government would give its eye teeth to have a programme that raised the average age of sexual intercourse to 21.
I would not wish to raise the average age of sexual intercourse to 21. I think it's unrealistic and it's likely to
That's what they've done.
create people who feel full of guilt and anxiety.
I didn't start having intercourse until I was married at the age of well into my 20s, and I certainly don't feel guilty. Sex is grand and a beautiful thing, but it can be dangerous, and we're just not
I
communicating.
do think that Dr. Stammers is taking a rather extreme view and rather unusual one, and most people in this room will not, I think, agree with him or have the same experience as him. Sex is indeed a very beautiful thing. To try and tell children that sex is wrong or right, a moral issue, isn't the way to handle it. I think we need to talk about responsibility. Now, Lorraine was making the point about it isn't a matter of being right or wrong, it's about being responsible. Sex is morally wrong if you hurt somebody. Sex is morally wrong if you exploit somebody. Sex of itself is not morally right or wrong. Sex is something that should be addressed responsibly, and we should be helping our young people to take a responsible view of sex, whether they have sex at the unfortunately early age, I agree, of 14, or whether they wait until they're late teens.
Last word,
Yes,
Reverend Lorraine.
Just to endorse what you've said, I think the whole business, where are they going to learn this responsibility but by watching the kind of lives their parents together lead? And where is sex going to lead them to? Hopefully to a lifelong relationship. What is that going to be like? It's going to be a relationship of tenderness, of understanding, of love, of humour, of the occasional row, but actually when they see that conflict is reconciled, people move on and are enriched by it. Sex is part of this greater picture.
Very few children are in that situation now, though. This is the problem. We are dealing with it completely. We're dealing with reality, aren't we?
Well,
it's a pragmatic approach. That's what we're talking
I don't
about.
accept this particular reality that there are no families out there who are struggling bravely to try to make this happen for their children.
OK, thank you all very much. Thank you. Well, listen, if you want to have your say on that, I'm sure you have a few thoughts. Just log on to BBC www, let me start that one again, www.bbc.co.uk/the big questions. Follow the links to the message board. We're also asking this morning, do we place too much value on appearance? And should we have a right to privacy? And how about this? You can also suggest topics for future debates, but don't miss the live action here from Cardiff. For some people, their face is their fortune. Others are prepared to spend a fortune to get the face of their dreams. Let's face it, today beauty is more than skin deep. It's become linked to success, popularity, even goodness. You just have to watch any American film and you see those values being exercised. The guy with the crooked teeth is always the crooked guy. It's normally a British actor as well. Do we place too much value on appearance? Sarah, it's you again. How are you?
I'm still thinking about sex, actually.
Well, maybe you never stop. I don't know. You spent a load of money, haven't you? I mean, I know your website is actually called The Real Life Barbie. We know the kind of look that you're going for here, and you spent, you know, well, you've had the value of about £500,000 worth of operations.
Yeah, it might be a bit more than that, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 50 this year.
50 years old. What do you think about that? Not even a round of applause. I mean, I think There's too many people disagreeing with you from the last debate. They're still holding a grudge. Why have you done this? What are you looking for?
What do you mean? Because I want to look like this and not minging. I mean, it's quite obvious. I want to get up in the morning and have loads of sex. Let's go back to sex here, because if you feel attractive on the outside, you're going to feel attractive on the inside, and that's basically the bottom line at the end of the day.
Don't they love you because of what is on the inside? We may disagree with some of the things you said, we may not, but you're a fantastic person. Isn't that the most important thing?
Well, no, not with me, because I've carved myself a hugely successful business in the world of cosmetics as well. I mean, I've become an international public figure and travel all over the world on TV and radio and what have you.
Well, what example are you setting?
I'm setting a very good example as far as I'm concerned. If you're unhappy with something, then go and change it, because it's not going to go away. And a lot of people just sit there moaning about how they look, whether their hair's not right or their teeth's not right, or they want bigger boobs or they want a bigger bum, or whatever the case may be. Either address it or stop whinging. I mean, it's quite simple, really.
I was going to come to you in the last debate, but your hand's up again. Would you like to say something about this?
The reason sometimes people complain is because of all these pressures, because of seeing people change themselves. Having that example makes you lead to conclusions that you need to change yourself. And when you have those sort of examples around you, you can't help but, you know, fall under the pressure.
You think other people might see you and think, well, maybe I should do that, whereas that maybe might not have occurred to them.
But it's all down to the individual and choices that we make.
What do you say to your children if they say, what are you doing now, Mummy? What do you say to them? Do you say that's a good thing? Or?
Well, I think I should run for office, actually, considering the damage Gordon Brown has done, but I shall... But actually,
but what do you say
to
your children about what you're doing? If they said, well, Mummy, if you're one of your kids, I don't know, how old are your children?
I've got a 25-year-old, a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old.
What if a 5-year-old said, one day, Mummy, I want to change my nose? What would you say?
Well, I would point her in the right direction, because obviously all surgeons specialise in different areas, and you need to be able to channel people in the correct way to get the right surgery, because obviously you see so many disasters out there. I mean, look like they've sort of been in a wind tunnel or something. And
hang on, I'm saying you point her in the right direction. I thought you were going to say, I'd say, really, you've got a beautiful nose, darling. But you're pointing her to... You're pointing her to the right address in Harley Street.
That's correct. Absolutely, because if somebody's not happy with something and they keep on addressing
this
and talking, and they keep talking about it and whinging about it, it's not going to go away. So you might as well say, well, go here and you can get it sorted out.
Jenny Trent Hughes.
I'm 53 and I expect a round of applause. That's point one.
What about these values?
Point two. I've actually always had a thing about Barbie and said that if I could change anything in the world, it would be to permanently eradicate Barbie. Do you know? Do you want to know what Barbie was originally modeled on? A German blow-up sex toy. That was what Barbie was originally modeled on. I'm sure you're a lovely lady. I've seen you on television before. You're very entertaining, blah, blah, blah. If you look, okay, you have on an intense amount of makeup and you have hair extensions. So actually, I'm sure that without the makeup and without the hair extensions, you know, there's not anything that couldn't be done with a nice bra or whatever. When I look at you, I have no idea what your personality is really like. If I look at the woman that's standing behind Nikki with the short red hair, you have an idea of what her character is like, who she is. You could be wrong, but she's very attractive, and you see something looking out.
She's a nightmare. You wouldn't want to know her.
Could be. You know, look at the lady in the back row with the pink top on, who's also, you know, not...
But listen, that's unfair because your personality shines through, but it would shine through anyway, wouldn't it?
Well, of course it would. It doesn't make any difference. At the end of the day, I choose to look how I want to look, and as I said before, I've carved a huge, successful business out of being who I am and doing what I do.
Simon, you want to come in here? What would you say about her 5-year-old? She'd say, well, you know, make sure you go to the right surgeon.
Well, you mean, I've had probably more plastic surgery operations than you have.
Probably not.
Perhaps not.
Not necessarily in the same places.
Yeah, definitely not in the same places. But you look around and you think to yourself, first of all, it's not permanent, and you've spent $500,000. Most other people that may be convinced because of what you've had done probably couldn't afford over £500,000. But how much is it going to cost to keep going so that you're always going to be happy? Because you're chasing
It's a quest for the holy Barbie.
It can't exist. It can't be there forever.
It is. It's never attainable. That's what you're saying.
No, it's just not attainable. I mean, you're going to be chasing that. And if you're convincing other young women, or other young men even, I mean, that what they need to chase is this so-called perfection that really doesn't exist. Perfection is in the eye of the person.
But the value, do we put too much value on appearance? You're a national treasure. Because we know what you did for this country, we know what you've been through. But do you still get people who look at you in a funny way?
Yeah, oh God, yeah. I mean, you get all types of incidents where people are rude, crude, nasty. But, you know, that's for me to deal with. It's not for me to worry anybody else about. But the fact is, it does go on because people judge you on the way that you actually look, which perhaps contradicts a bit of what I was saying. But the fact of the matter is that as long as I'm confident with who I am, and I like who I am, which I do, I don't have to worry about whether I fit into any other stereotype.
Isn't that the most important thing? I just wonder. But Sam, I mean, let me just tell people who you are and what you do. You're a manager of the Harley Medical Group, massive nationwide cosmetic group. Tell us about the transform. People come in to have a nip here and a tuck there and a bit of enhancement there. Tell us what it does for people. In here.
Well, firstly, they're absolutely ordinary people. They're people that live amongst us in our neighbourhood. They're not celebrities. They're not people who have this done regularly. This is a one-off thing that they have thought about, on average, I would say, for 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. We do check how long they've been thinking about it, who knows they're there, all the thought processes they've gone through to get to that nurse consultation stage. And it does change their life. It's the happiest day ever when they come back in after the operation and tell us how positive they feel afterwards.
You make people happy this way?
Yes.
Yeah. Who can argue? Who can argue with that? I'm just looking for someone. Go on, sir.
I just think it's a bit ironic. We've just had a discussion about sex and how we should be more responsible, and here we are talking about how to make ourselves look better to achieve that aim. £500,000 to make yourself look more sexually attractive seems disproportionate.
Yeah, Wenda?
I mean, it's more about the personal benefits as well. I mean, I get lots of clients that come to see me, and it may be that they've reached a certain age.
You're an image consultant.
I'm an image consultant. It may be that they've reached a certain age, that mum's getting back to work, they've got a job interview, and they want to feel confident. They want to have a boost with their self-esteem, and that's one way of establishing that.
But what do you think about somebody, if somebody, Professor, wants their nose to be fixed, do you not worry about more what's going on inside their head rather than the shape of their nose?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think appearances do matter. Let's be honest about it. We all want to look good. It's not just media. We want to look good, and part of our expression of ourselves is, in fact, in how we look and how we present ourselves. I mean, I decided not to dye my hair some years ago, leave it this sort of white colour, and actually I quite like it now. But I think the way that people present themselves, if they really feel that their nose is hampering their happiness, then I think maybe there is a case for some kind of surgery. But quite often, it's such a minor change. I think we need to work, first of all, with how people want to look. Can we do it with what they are naturally, with a bit of makeup, with a bit of advice on how to dress, rather than bringing out the knife? Because the knife is a very harsh and permanent
You have regular
institution.
customers?
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many. They tend to be ordinary people who just want to fix one thing. My first patient, going back to your point, my first patient ever at the Harley Medical Group was a lady who told me she wanted her nose fixed because she'd never, ever had her photograph taken with her children, ever. Now, that does need to be changed to make her feel better about herself.
But I mean, what's going on inside, do you think?
Well, I think it comes back to that point that is it that you fix something on the outside to feel good inside? And I can understand that there's a certain logic in certain circumstances in that. But I think far more important is it's feeling good inside is what makes you attractive on the outside.
And does this not... your hand was up a few minutes ago. What would you like to say?
I just wanted to say that people, like, if you're going to go out and spend, like, £500,000 on making yourself look like a Barbie, then when people look at you, they're going to think, well, maybe I should look like that. So by doing that to yourself, maybe you're putting insecurities in other people who then want to go out and change themselves. So by you, like, say somebody had a problem with their nose, maybe you want to try and make them feel better about their nose rather than go out and get it changed straight away, because that's the first solution we're throwing at them. Go get it changed.
Yeah, and you're on.
The media is very responsible for this, and it's all directed at young women and women who want to keep...
Young men too.
Not that many. We haven't seen a Ken here. We've seen the Barbies, haven't we? And that's what's important, and it's making women feel very insecure that as they grow older, their appeal is lapsing. Now, I'm growing older and I see my mother in the mirror every time I look in it, and it really doesn't please me. But what can I do about it? And why should I be made to feel awful and unwanted and unloved because I haven't got that young bloom, that youthful...
And also the whole Hollywood thing. You don't see people in Hollywood with normal teeth or normal breasts anymore. You don't see reality portrayed on the screen, which makes us think that what we see on the screen is the reality. And that's the distorting process, isn't it, Sarah? Sam, Sarah?
Well, I don't know if it is a distorting process. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want to look at ugly people adorning our screens and newspapers and what have you.
Ouch!
We don't, because people... Ouch! That is true.
Who are you to say what is okay?
At the end of the day, lad makes rules.
But who are you to say that? And who is anybody else to say that? You know, I understand that on TV that young women are what they want for presenting shows, and after you get to a certain age, TV doesn't want you. And that's something that needs to be addressed within the TV world. But who are you to say what is attractive and what isn't?
I'm not. No, I'm not saying that. No, you're misconstruing what I'm saying. No, you're twisting completely what I'm saying.
We don't want to see ugly people, you said, on our screens.
No, they don't. They don't.
Who is
because
they?
They don't.
Who is they?
The media.
You might not.
The media.
You might not.
The media all have attractive people on the television.
I would rather see someone who is intelligent with something to say, as long as they've washed their hair and they have clean clothes on, than someone that that's... First of all, do you know that as a country, 94% of the women in this country are unhappy with their appearance? That is shocking. If you look around the world, we probably have the highest rate of dissatisfaction
low self-esteem.
with our...
Terrible.
And it's low, and it's all about low
but
self-esteem.
look at the appeal of... Nobody is saying that nobody's pretending that John Sargent bears any resemblance to Brad Pitt. But the public, when he was on Strictly Come Dancing, absolutely loved him, didn't they? Maybe it was because it was so refreshing. I don't know. Hands up here. Yes, what would you like to say?
Me.
Yeah.
I think if you make value on appearance a priority, then it contributes to things like anorexia and bullying.
But we all do it, don't we?
Yeah.
Whether we know we're doing it or not.
We had an example just now, like saying, "Oh, we don't want ugly people." How are people going to feel? That's just like kind of bullying, if you think about it. Because if people feel insecure, then you're saying, "Oh, you look ugly," and that's humiliating them. And I think it's wrong.
And it was Kerry Burnell, wasn't there? The brilliant presenter on CBeebies who was born without an arm, and people actually complained. Did you see that story, Lorraine? People complained about her. Parents complained because they didn't want their children being frightened by somebody who didn't have an arm. I mean, how ludicrous is a society in which that happens?
Well, it is ludicrous, and I think what I'd like to just bring us back on what some of the recent people have been saying is that what we're really talking about is self-acceptance. It isn't really about whether I look or don't look beautiful or anybody else thinks I'm beautiful. It's actually getting us back to a place where we can accept ourselves. And speaking as a person of faith, I think that it is a great help if you can understand that we're here created by a loving God for a purpose who actually accepts us in the way we are, however that is. Of course we can do things to help that along, and if we're very miserable with some aspect of our appearance and we find it that difficult to accept ourselves and to help others to accept themselves, then of course that lady is absolutely right. There's a time and place for everything, but you can take it too far. And it's actually, I think, learning...
Do you think Sarah's taking it too far?
I think possibly she has. I'm not inside her head or her heart, but I suspect that somewhere there must be a person who is deeply unhappy with the person that she really is underneath all the surgery.
That's what people like to think about me, because it actually makes them feel better about themselves. That is absolutely untrue, because what people are trying to put upon me is that I've got body dysmorphia. They say I could go up the gym and do this. I don't know any gym that can make my face look any better, to be quite honest. And at the end of the day, I want to look good, and I earn a lot of money from looking good, so that's it.
Therein lies part of the crunch. We're now bringing money into it. You have a business which actually, I mean, with the greatest respect, I think you look great. Personally, I wouldn't particularly want to look like you do, but I'm not you, and I'm not running a business.
I wouldn't want to look like
you either.
No. Is that not your next project? Is it a work in progress?
Work in progress of what?
Are you a work in progress?
Absolutely.
What's next?
I don't know yet. I'm too busy travelling all over the world and enjoying myself.
But you're not finished, not the finished article?
Absolutely not. Probably when I'm about 80, when they hammer the nails in the coffin.
Yeah, but what might be next? A bit of this, a bit of that? I don't know. I don't understand these things. What?
I don't know. Perhaps I'll go to this lady.
Yeah. Are you an addict?
Absolutely. Of course I'm addicted to it. I'm addicted to looking good and feeling good about myself. I want to get up in the morning and feel good when I look in the mirror.
Joy, you've been dying to come in here.
I just think it's fascinating that we think it's okay to spend lots of money, and even people who perhaps don't go to the extremes that you've gone to in terms of spending money, that it's okay to spend money on what we look like on the outside, but how much time and effort and energy and money even do we invest on what we're like on the inside?
But we do judge by looks, whether it comes to job interviews, everybody does it.
The truth is, I would rather spend half an hour with somebody who's a good person, and you see that coming from the inside of them out as you're spending time with them, than I would with someone who just looks good on the outside and you come away thinking, what was all that about?
Somebody makes you laugh, somebody's interesting. Well, you know that we've all... And as well, Jenny, final word on this. We've all met people who are, you know, the first time you meet them you think, well, they're not an oil painting, they're maybe what we might be brutally described as ugly, but then this incredible personality emerges and they become, because of that, incredibly attractive, don't they? You know people like that? We all know people like that.
I felt that way the first time I met you. Oh, I mean, it absolutely does come from the inside.
Yeah.
You know, you can look through the audience here and you see people that you think, I'd like to talk to her, I'd like to talk to him. They look like they would be fun.
Yeah.
And it also is relevant. You know, not everyone wants to look like a Barbie. That is not my definition of what looks good. And quickly, the girl in the back there, do you know that there have been all these studies done about eating disorders, and eating disorders are almost non-existent in ethnic communities because we are not fed the same images of perfection that everyone else is. So we don't want to grow up and look like Barbies. So actually our you know, feelings about plastic surgery and things like that are much, much lower because we are not distorted by the media.
Interesting thought. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. Sarah, thank you. Well, let us know what you think. You can log on to bbc.co.uk/The Big Questions. Add your views to the interesting views we've already heard in the studio. Add your views to the message board and also contribute to our last debate. Should we have a right to privacy? And you can apply to be in our audience at future shows. We'll be in Bury next week, Leicester on March the 15th, and Enfield on the 22nd of the month. Well, not only does Britain top the European Teenage Pregnancy League, as our first debate discussed, we're also top of the World League of the Most Watched Citizens. There is one CCTV camera for every 14 people. You don't have to be paranoid if you'll watch these days. Officialdom says it's all for your safety. If you've nothing to hide, what are you worrying about? But for those who have private lives, who've been caught on camera or whose personal details were on lost laptops, they are not so convinced. Should we have a right to privacy? But then there's a lot of paranoia about this, Phil, isn't there? There's a lot of paranoia because, you know, I know we've got all these CCTV cameras and databases are lost, but some people, I mean, maybe you think the government have some ill intent here. They're just trying to protect us. They're trying to help us be safer. They're trying to make us be healthier.
They're deeply misguided. They're at a time when they're losing 25 million people's records. That's a fact. You don't have to be paranoid to worry about the safety of your family.
But there isn't some evil genius in a
thing.
cave somewhere collating this and looking at this.
I don't think many people are saying that. And the thousands of people who went to the Convention on Modern Liberty yesterday, you know, these are people with concerns about what's happening to them, their families, their lives, their private lives, because the government is clearly out of control.
Well,
it's
CCTV
not
makes
just
us safer.
stuff.
CCTV makes us safer.
The Home Office's own studies show that CCTV makes us no safer than putting street lighting in there. What you need to make to tackle crime is to have police actually walking the streets. That's what the evidence shows. So the government sort of saying, let's build another big database, let's grab more information from people when we actually can't look after the information we have already, is a part of the problem.
Professor Shepherd, CCTV, does it make us safer?
It certainly does. It makes us safer, particularly in public spaces, in city centre streets.
for example, and it does that by allowing police officers, as you've rightly said, get round the corner, down the road to the scene of an argument or a punch-up before harm's happened. And
does the Home Office evidence actually support you? Because the studies I've seen show that people feel safer about crime, but they don't change their behaviour. If you're drunk and you're going to have a fight and get into a fight, it's not going to stop someone who's in that state from punching someone else in the face.
They certainly change behaviour with robbery and car thieving and theft from cars. They act as a big deterrent because those crimes are normally premeditated, and people go out there with the idea and the plan to rob someone or to take something.
Sure, so it moves that sort of crime on, absolutely.
Well, actually, the evidence shows that the displacement is not such a problem as we thought it was. But I'm convinced from the research evidence that CCTV in our city centre streets keeps people out of hospital because it allows the coppers to get to an argument, get to a punch-up before harm's done.
And the NHS database helps people when they're in hospital.
Well, the NHS database, clearly regulation in this area is important, and we need to regulate for specific purposes.
Yes.
So I'm very much with the Information Commissioner Richard Thomas on this. We need to decide beforehand what
But it's
the
fundamentally
purpose.
a good thing.
And I think it's particularly, one of the examples here is with medical research, and many of us wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for the high-grade medical research, which is done very ethically and
just using one
very
example
high
of
standard.
data sharing, though, medical research, I don't think anyone in this audience would say we shouldn't have some sort of medical research, certainly on anonymised data. But they're not talking about that. They're talking about sharing our medical details, my family's details, with commercial companies. They're sharing it already. 1 billion hospital visit records have been passed to commercial companies, a PFI.
Guy in the blue shirt back then. Come to the panel.
Yeah, I would disagree with the gentleman there. In relation to CCTV, I mean, I actually work for the police as a PCSO, and for the last 4 years, I sort of patrol. And in relation to CCTV, the number of times that we've had CCTV that's brought perpetrators to justice, basically. And from my experience also is that if CCTV was in the area, time after time after time, the victims of crime or antisocial behaviour wish that there was something actually caught on camera that would have brought the perpetrators to justice. And I agree with you, if in an ideal world, if we had lots of police officers out patrolling
but
on every
CCTV
street
does work.
corner...
Yeah. Simon, what do you think? Because do you think do you think it's getting as bad as kind of some people say East Germany used to be? I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it? I know we have more surveillance here than anywhere else in Western Europe, but isn't it a good thing?
Well, we're talking about two or three different things here. CCTV is good if it works, and if there's enough coverage in the city centres. My son got mugged before Christmas, had his jaw broken, for no good reason, for a couple of bit of cheap baubles. There was no CCTV, and this was, funnily enough, right by the Crown Court, right by the main police station in central Cardiff, and right on an underpass. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that they were wearing bright-coloured clothing that was identified by my son and his friend who were mugged, the police would have never have got them. The fact of the matter is that we have other bits of private information that are being used, which are being shared, which are being lost, which are being mislaid, and they now want to, I mean, we've seen they want to do, be able to trace and track every text message sent, every email that's sent. I mean, hang on, how far are we going? We're becoming victims of this terror culture. We're becoming victims
to keep us safer because of the threat of terror, isn't it?
But it's a threat. It's not as real as people make out. There are less people killed by terrorism in this country. I mean, and people may say, well, it shows it works. But over the years, even with the IRA, when they were part and parcel of us, you know, there was less people killed by that than drink driving.
Well, I just point anyone to the CCTV images of the July the 7th bombers. But David Holland, you work for Cardiff Council, in charge of RIPA, investigative powers. Give us the justification for somebody being under covert surveillance.
Nicky, you've done lots of work as a consumer journalist. You heard lots of stories of rogue traders ripping off elderly people for thousands and thousands of pounds, you know. Should we have a right to privacy? Yes. But I think that privacy right starts to dissipate when you start to damage society by your activities. And how do I go back to a son or a daughter of that elderly person and say, I've got an invoice with a mobile phone number on. This is the man who ripped off your mum, dad for £5, £10, £20,000, but I can't trace that number because I would infringe his human rights. And I find that very difficult, a very difficult argument to sustain. I think those powers, when used as necessary and proportionally, and that key words are necessary and proportional.
You've got the evidence that you've got a piece of paper with someone's mobile phone on and that
you
someone
need a
has
fishing-
been defrauded.
sometimes you need a fishing
can
trip.
go and get a warrant and you can go and find this out. This is proper police procedure under rule of law. It's got nothing to do with human rights because you've got evidence and somewhat a crime that's occurred.
Carol, what happened to you?
I was actually, I wasn't directly under surveillance, but a colleague where I worked, a former employer, was under surveillance, and I was filmed once with the colleague, which there was no problem with me. They were under investigation. But on another occasion, I was never told this by the employer, but I discovered at a later date that I had actually been filmed, and I was shown it. The one occasion was when I was with the other colleague, which was fine because that was work time. But the other occasion was when I was filmed alone, putting out the rubbish in my back garden. And that had nothing whatsoever to do with their investigation. And when I saw it, I was horrified. Not just the fact that I didn't have any makeup on.
We put far too much value on appearance.
But I'm joking. But the fact that I was trying to figure out, well, where was this person when they filmed me in relation to my back garden? I didn't see anybody.
That is really sinister.
I was
See, that is what I mean. I don't want to make you the whipping boy here, David.
That's what
but
I came
that
here for.
is what happens when people like you get too much powers. It's mission creep, isn't it?
Do you know, you keep saying the word powers. You said Ripper powers. There are no Ripper powers. What Ripper does is make me accountable to the people in this room. They can ask me, how many times did you do it? Why did you do it? Councillor McAvoy can come in my office and ask me why. You take Ripper away from local authorities, and I won't have that information.
It's the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. It is how it was what the government brought in, saying we need to tackle terrorism, we need to tackle serious crime. That these powers have now been devolved down to local government officers and what have you. Even ministers are now saying it's gone too far.
Carol.
They know it's gone too far.
In my case, this was not serious crime. It was, I think, the person was thought to be misappropriating work time. I was not asked. I knew nothing about it whatsoever. I didn't even know the person was under investigation. Why should I, who was accused of nothing, be filmed putting my rubbish out? And I was not told about it, so that if they had told me and said, well, we've inadvertently filmed you and we're going to destroy it, they didn't even ask my permission or didn't even tell me later.
Lord Bingham, the most senior judge in this country, said we are the most spied upon people in the world in this country, the democratic world. I think that's a very important adjective, I think. Are you worried about the DNA database, Lorraine?
I'm worried about the DNA database, but I'm also worried about what this whole conversation is beginning to suggest we may be moving towards, and that is a culture where you are guilty until proved innocent, which goes... And as it is, we can very easily make mistakes, even with all the technology that we have for surveillance.
Would you mind being on the DNA database as a citizen?
I probably am on it, for all I know, but I
have you been arrested for a crime or
No,
question?
I've never been arrested for a crime.
You're probably
or
not on it then.
Of one.
But would you think?
But
why not make it voluntary?
I'm not sure. Well, the way they're going to, I suppose, make these things voluntary is through the ID card system, where if you don't, you'll be allowed to say no, but if you do say no, then you will not be eligible for a passport, which is then we quickly find ourselves into a situation.
I have the right to travel. How is it voluntary if I can no longer leave the country of my birth?
We then quickly find ourselves in a position that the average Russian citizen was before the end of the communist regime.
Have anyone seen the film? Yeah, the lives of others. The film set in East Germany. Jenny Willett, you were at this convention, weren't you? Lib Dem MP for Cardiff Central. The problem is, if we have any sort of a privacy law in this country, broadly speaking, look at. Mark Oaten was to be your Home Affairs spokesman, wouldn't he? But he was exposed in the newspaper for his relationship with rent boys. In France, President Mitterrand. For years, nobody knew had a second family because of the privacy laws in France. And if we go too far in that direction, we lose the truth about, well, people like you and me.
I hope you're not suggesting I've done anything that I'm ashamed of. But I think
people who are public figures.
The issue is that, and one of the reasons why I believe we do actually need a right to privacy, is it needs to be balanced. The right to privacy has to be balanced against the right to press freedom and so on. But actually at the moment that's not written down, it's all done on a case-by-case basis. We have huge extremes in one direction and in the other.
But did we have a right to know about Max Mosley's parties, for example?
Personally, I don't think so, unless it impinged on his job and the way that he was acting in the public field. Actually, what he does behind closed doors, I don't think
It's
is
his
anybody
own
else's business.
Similarly, did we have a right to know about Mark Oaten, your former Home Affairs
I think
spokesman?
that probably yes, because actually he was the Home Affairs spokesperson. What he was doing was illegal, and it was breaching the law that he was then making decisions on. So that's why I think it is a balancing act. It doesn't mean that a right to privacy, buying sex, is illegal. So I don't think that it's not as black and white, but actually I think at the moment it's not written down, it's not clear, and I think that really needs to be defined so we know where we stand and the government knows where it can't intrude, because the government's at the moment, you used the word mission creep, the government's going far too far and it's not clearly defined.
Martin Shipton from the Western Mail, you want to come in here?
I don't think that buying sex is illegal. It's illegal to run a brothel, but it's not illegal to buy sex. My concern as a journalist is that a privacy law could greatly interfere with the rights of journalists acting as representatives of the public to investigate wrongdoing.
But I have friends who do what you do, and you have friends who do this as well. Tapping into voicemail, getting people's private mobile phone records. Now, listen,
there are already laws against that. There are laws against that. There was a guy from the News of the World who went to jail. Yeah?
Let's be honest here.
You don't need a privacy law. You don't need a privacy law to stop that.
They all do it.
They don't all do it. Some do it, and some go to prison, like Clive Goodman of the News of the World.
A privacy law. We have privacy law. We have things like this Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, which is quite an unpopular sort of law in certain sort of quarters, but it gives us the right to a private family life. We have the common law of confidentiality. About keeping stuff private between people. I think we do have protections in law, and we've just seen on the DNA database...
Do we have a right to know about Max Mosley or Mark Oaten or whoever? Do we have a right to know that stuff?
I think, so Jenny was saying, it's about whether someone is actually doing something and it's of concern to the public generally. What I do is probably largely uninteresting and irrelevant to most people. What a politician does, or someone that's paid to run an important organisation or business, is probably more of interest, but we have to be careful to respect people's private family life.
Yeah, go on, sir. Yeah, go on.
I think generally we're living in quite dangerous times, and I think liberties that we've always taken for granted are maybe under threat now. Give you one example. Guantanamo Bay was accepted by our government, and people lost their liberty without trial, no evidence whatsoever. We lock up asylum seekers. People come here seeking asylum.
There's a blanket phrase. There was evidence against... Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, for example.
Well, I'll give you another example. Mozambique, completely innocent man, but was locked up for 2 years in solitary confinement. But I do think the CCTV may be a bit of a red herring, because actually, in my experience, CCTV can preserve liberty, and that needs to be thought about as well.
Something that we as a campaign, because I represent...
You're just worried about ID cards.
We're concerned about the database state, that taking of all of our information, putting a camera up there. You can see that there's a camera, and you can be worried by the camera because you're being, if you know about it, that you can see what's there. What we're talking about is information being taken from all of our families. I mean, every term.
Well, thank you very much indeed for being on camera this morning. Thank you all very much indeed for that. All the debates continue.